If I tell a builder, hey, I might have a piece of property, the first thing they say is, does it have sewer?
You know, one of the important things I've learned, even though my knowledge was that it had water available out there at the road, there are some areas, however, where we are at capacity. Doing the due diligence, we found out that the city could not provide sewer for 3 years. If you're the buyer in that situation, is that an important factor to know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on another REI-NWA Podcast. This is episode number 55, and we're going to be talking about what to do with a property, how to know what the highest and best use for the property is. And as always, I'm your host, Colley Bailey, broker at Lone Rock Realty. And I have my basically co-host at this point, Larry Kelly. Good to see you again.
I've been here a time or two.
Yeah. So we're doing a builder circle. And we're just talking about, you got an opportunity to buy some property. How do you know what to build and what the highest and best use of that particular property is? What do you think?
Ask lots of questions.
Okay.
You know.
And my first thought is location, right? So much will lead from where it is, right?
Location's an important factor. You know, some of the things, and I think what Kathleen asked me to do is to kind of bring into conversation part of the current projects I've been working on, things like that. And so location, access, you know, we're doing a subdivision, or I've got a couple of subdivision projects going on, and how do you want that access to look? The way that you might utilize that property has a lot to do with how you access it, which direction you're going to come from. Is it going to be down the middle, on the side? You know, those are the kind of things. Does it have frontage on the highway or frontage on the street? There are a lot of variables.
Yeah. And then also access to utilities and infrastructure, right? Sewage.
You must be reading my notes upside down.
Well, it's just it's a common question. Like if I tell a builder, hey, I might have a piece of property, the first thing they say is, does it have sewer? That was the first thing they say.
Does it have water and sewer?
Yep.
Because depending on where you're looking at that property, you can't take utilities as a given. You just really can't. You know, one of the important things I've learned over the last few projects is that even though my knowledge was that it had water available out there at the road, because there was evidence of that, I drove by it. I could see the fire hydrants, or in the rural areas, you can see the standpipes, the flush pipes, and so you know that everybody up and down there has water. There are some areas, however, where we are at capacity. And sewer is even more important. There are areas of Benton County especially where there may be sewer that's assumed, but there's no capacity to connect. And so those are increasingly becoming important factors, is making sure that not only is utility available, but can you connect? It may be there,
but you might not be able to put 200 houses right there.
You know, we just recently sold some property, large acreage tract, where doing the due diligence, we found out that the city could not provide sewer for 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So if you're the buyer in that situation, is that an important factor to know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because you're holding time and holding costs.
Maybe it fits into your schedule, and maybe it doesn't.
Maybe it doesn't.
In your budget. Yeah.
But I'm sure that what this particular buyer was thinking of is that I can buy it at today's price, and 3 years from now, that may be a much better and higher price.
Yeah.
So do I want to buy it?
Too. Yeah.
You know, real estate's a good investment, I hear.
Yep. They even have clubs about this.
They even have clubs. Yeah, absolutely. Good information. One of the other things on the outline that we'll talk about is topography. Believe it or not, everyone believes that level property is ideal for development. However, if you don't have a sewer situation and you're looking at septic systems, level is not always great.
Mm-hmm. Even with sewer, you need some fall.
You need some fall. The latest subdivision we did, we found out just how much fall we had to have to that manhole.
Yep.
And it was 16 feet deep.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Is that an important factor?
Absolutely.
Oh, yes, especially in our marketplace because, Guy, we've got some limestone and some bedrock. And so does that impact the cost of your development? Well, if you have to dig 16 foot deep and you hit rock, you're going to have to get a rock saw or you're going to have to blast because it still has to meet that depth requirement in order to have the fall. So it's very impactful to study the topography, the utilities. The other thing that topography comes into play is your drainage.
Yep. Where does the water go?
Where's the water go?
Yep.
And in most situations, they're going to require some engineering to make sure that it doesn't affect off-site owners.
Yep.
As well.
Can you talk about hardscape, what that means? So when you go in and you build a neighborhood, people don't realize this, but it actually creates more runoff than it just being a field. People forget about that. Talk a little bit about
That's actually
that.
Many of the cities are starting to consider that in their permit and approval process because they want to know how much is going to be covered. And honestly, Colley, the more that we do developing in our area, the more runoff is created and the faster that it runs off.
Yep.
Because streets are hardscape. Rooftops are hardscape.
Yep.
And we're taking over areas that ground used to cover and otherwise would be somewhat absorbed. Mm-hmm. There's some calculations that have to be considered in that, and more, that's the first step in developing the property.
Yep.
How much coverage are we going to have, and what are we going to have for absorption? And there's some creative engineering that's starting to take place with underground depositories for water runoff rather than having half of your property taken up in a water retention basin.
Right.
Although there's been some pretty creative things done with those, but
Yep.
we're starting to look at doing some of those underground now.
That's an interesting thought. That's especially in a dense area, that starts to make sense, I think.
Well, as our property becomes more and more valuable,
Yeah.
and you have to get density out of the design, you just simply don't have room for those big retention basins.
Right.
And that doesn't maximize the highest and best use of that property.
Yep. What about planning departments? How do they fall into that?
That's something I always look at as well as zoning. It may be the situation where the highest and best use for that property is to change the zoning. In residential, it may be that, hey, it only allows for one building, one residential home per lot. Mm-hmm. And if you can get that zoning changed, then you might be able to build more than that on that property. So it all comes
commercial at the front,
it all comes
residential in
together.
the back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, that I've been a big proponent of
We
mixed
haven't
use
had
development.
enough of that, I feel.
Yeah, we have not. And in fact, I was just here in the library building last week, Urban Land Institute, and we were talking about some of those concepts and how we need to see more development of communities rather than neighborhoods. And
Right.
so when we talk about that, that's a mixed use or a planned unit development. And it may be something that's very applicable for the property you're looking at. The highest and best use could be a multitude of things.
Right. Depends on how big it is, where it is. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then one of the notes that I made is what's needed.
Right.
Golly, if I'm looking at a piece of property, what would be best suited there? You know? Do we need townhomes? Do we need single family? Do we need apartments? What would be best for that area? And all of it comes together. It's location, it's utilities, it's topography, it's zoning, it's need. And, you know, you can't do everything on every single property.
Right. Right.
So you may want to back into that and go, what's the need? What do I want to build? What do I want to develop?
Yeah.
And approach it from that way, and then find the property that's suitable for that. But everyone is not a good fit.
Yep. All right. So there's a lot to dig into at this upcoming Builder Circle. Again, this is going to be on Tuesday, February 4th, 2025. It's at the Rendezvous Junction Brewery. Really fun location. It's in Rogers. Come on out. Doors will open at 5:30. We'll get started networking at 6. Bring some business cards. Look forward to meeting some other investors, and we'll dig into highest and best use of property with Larry Kelley.
Sounds good to me. Thanks, Colley.
Yeah, absolutely. Always good to have you on the show.
It'll be fun.
Well, that's it for this one. We'll catch you on the next one.